The red brick house at the end of Maple Lane stood like an old soldier, quiet, steady, carrying a lifetime of memories. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I am 72 years old. Every morning I pour tea into the same porcelain cup my husband gave me for Christmas in 1978. Out on the porch, the apple trees he planted decades ago still throw their shadows across the worn wooden steps. That afternoon, while I watered my rose bushes, I heard something that froze the air around me. Whispering voices drifted from the garage, sharp enough to cut through the sound of running water. It was my son's voice, the kind of voice that once asked me for help with homework, now lowered into a scheme. "All we need is her signature. The buyer's ready. We can close this week." Then my daughter's voice, sweet on the surface but laced with steel. "Tell her it's for her own good, that the house is too much for her. She'll sign without thinking." I set the watering can down. Water dripped onto my slippers, warm August sun soaking into the damp fabric. In that moment, every sound, the birds, the clock ticking inside, even the rustle of leaves, fell silent under one single word echoing in my head. Sell. Sell what? My home. The place where our wedding picture still hangs. The hallway marked with pencil lines of growing children. The porch where my husband once told me, "This is where we'll grow old together." I didn't walk out to confront them. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood still, my hand on the railing, letting the truth sink in. My own children were planning to erase me from the walls I had built. The garage door slammed, their car engine roared to life, and soon the street was quiet again. But this silence was different. It carried the cold weight of betrayal. I walked inside, opened the third drawer of the kitchen cabinet. The wood creaked the way only an owner knows. From beneath the lining, I pulled out a small walnut box scarred with age. A brass key rested on top. I touched it just once and slid it back. Not yet. The sun dropped low, spilling orange light across the photograph of my husband in his favorite brown sweater. My phone buzzed. A text in the family group chat. "Mom, we'll stop by tomorrow. There are some papers you need to sign. Get your pen ready." I stared at the smiley face at the end of the message, and I smiled too. But mine was a different kind of smile. I marked Friday's date on the wall calendar with a bold red line. Then I whispered, so quietly only the walls could hear, "Tomorrow, my dears, we'll see who's really holding the pen." That night I brewed another pot of tea. No neighbors, no calls, no panic. Just me, my house, and the quiet knowledge that I was already one step ahead. The next evening, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and roasted chicken, an old habit of mine whenever guests were coming. But this wasn't just any visit. This was a siege. The front door creaked open, and my children swept in as if they already owned the place. My son carried a leather briefcase, his tie tight, his shoulders stiff with self-importance. My daughter trailed behind, wine glass already in hand, her smile rehearsed and practiced. "Mom," my son said, laying a thick stack of papers on the dining table. My table, the same one that had seen birthday cakes, report cards, and Sunday prayers. "This is just a formality. We've arranged everything. All you have to do is sign." My daughter leaned in, her voice dripping with sympathy that wasn't real. "Mom, you shouldn't have to worry about this big old house anymore. It's too much work for you. We'll find you a nice place. Cozy, safe, think of it as a fresh start." The words cut sharper than any insult. Too much work, too old, too weak. I gripped the edge of my chair. My knuckles whitened, but my face remained calm. Silence is a language too, and I spoke it fluently. "Mom," my son pressed, sliding the pen closer, uncapping it with a loud click. "The buyer is generous. It's the best deal we'll ever get. Don't overthink this." Their eyes weren't on me. They were on the papers like vultures circling something they thought was already dead. I looked at the documents, then at their faces. My daughter sipping wine as if it were already a toast. My son tapping the pen, impatient. And in that moment, I felt it, the collapse, the crushing weight of being treated like a burden in my own home. But I didn't fight, not yet. I let the silence stretch heavy enough to make the chandelier hum. I folded my hands neatly on the table and said nothing. Because what they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that the trap wasn't closing on me. It was closing on them. As the pen hovered over the papers, my mind slipped back to the years when I learned what survival really meant. After my husband passed, people whispered that I wouldn't make it alone. Bills stacked high, the mortgage hanging heavy over my shoulders. My children were young then, and I worked nights just to keep the lights on. I remember scrubbing hospital floors until my hands cracked, saving every spare dollar. That was when I learned something vital. When the world expects you to crumble, you prepare in silence. I remembered the day I walked into my lawyer's office, my palms sweaty but my voice steady. I asked him one question: how do I make sure no one can ever take this house from me? He explained the trust, the clauses, the signatures that made my name the only name that mattered. That day, I didn't just protect a house. I protected every memory built inside its walls. While my children were off chasing promotions and vacations, I was filing paperwork, locking away the deed, setting the terms that even blood couldn't break. I thought of the walnut box in the drawer, the one I touched just last night. Inside it lay the documents no one knew existed, the trust that made the house untouchable without me, the receipts of every last mortgage payment my handwriting scratched across decades, and a letter my husband had signed before his passing, leaving the property entirely in my care. They believed my silence meant weakness, but silence was my armor. Every quiet nod, every calm smile, they mistook it for surrender when in truth it was strategy. I came back to the present, to the dining room heavy with their expectations. My daughter swirled her wine, smirking like victory was already hers. My son pushed the papers closer, the pen nearly touching my hand. And still, I said nothing. Because when you've spent a lifetime preparing, you don't need to rush the reveal. I glanced at the clock. My lawyer would arrive soon. They had no idea the ground beneath their feet was already shifting. Tomorrow they would learn I wasn't just living in this house, I was guarding it. The dining room was thick with expectation. My son leaned forward, pen poised like a dagger. My daughter swirled her wine as if the toast was already done. They thought the silence meant surrender. I let it hang for one more breath, then reached for the walnut box. The hinges squeaked, a sound sharp enough to make both of them glance up. Inside was not jewelry, not heirlooms, but the truth they never imagined. I laid a folder on the table, thicker, heavier than theirs. My son frowned. "What's this?" Before I could answer, the front door opened. My lawyer stepped in, briefcase in hand, his calm presence filling the room like a second heartbeat. He nodded at me, then at them. "Good evening. I believe there's been some confusion." Confusion, that word sliced the air cleaner than any shout. He opened the folder and spread out the papers, the trust documents, the deed with only my name, the ironclad clause that barred any sale, lease, or transfer without my explicit consent. Each page landed on the table with a soft thud, like a gavel falling. My daughter's wine glass trembled in her hand. My son's smirk vanished, replaced by a tight jaw, his pen now useless. I finally spoke, my voice steady, not raised, but carrying every ounce of authority they thought I had lost. "You wanted me to sign my life away, but while you were planning behind my back, I was protecting this house. This isn't just property. This is my home, and nothing moves without me." Silence stretched again, but this time it was theirs. The lawyer slid the final page across the table. "Legally speaking," he said, his tone polite but final, "there is no sale, no transfer, no deal. This home belongs solely to Mrs. Carter." The sound of the clock on the wall ticked louder and louder, marking the exact second their scheme crumbled. My son slumped back in his chair, pale with shock. My daughter stared into her glass, suddenly very interested in the wine she couldn't swallow. And me, I sat straighter than I had in years, the weight lifted from my chest. For the first time, I wasn't just defending my home. I was reclaiming my place inside it. I folded my hands, looked at both of them, and said with quiet finality, "Next time you try to erase me, remember, I'm always one step ahead." The lawyer's words still hung in the air like thunder after lightning. No sale, no transfer, no deal. My son's face flushed red. He shoved the useless papers aside, the pen clattering to the floor. "You went behind our backs," he snapped. "You tricked us." I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp as glass. "No, you went behind my back. I only told the truth to the walls that belong to me." My daughter's chair scraped as she stood, her wine glass shaking. "Mom, why would you do this? We were trying to help you." "Help me," I repeated, my hands steady on the table. "You call it help when you plan to sell the house your father built without even asking me. You call it help when you treat me like a signature, not a person." Her lip trembled, but she said nothing. I turned to my son, whose jaw was set tight, anger burning in his eyes. "All these years," I continued, "I cooked your meals, patched your clothes, worked myself to the bone so you'd have a future. And now you want to erase me from the very place that raised you. Shame on you, both of you." The chandelier above us flickered as if even the lights couldn't bear the tension. My son slammed his fist against the table. "You're being unreasonable. You're old, you don't understand how the world works anymore." That was when I rose from my chair, slow but unshaken, my shadow stretching across the dining room wall. "I understand more than you think," I said, my voice ringing with steel. "I understand betrayal when I see it. I understand greed hiding behind fake concern. And I understand this. I am not too old to protect what's mine." The words hit harder than any shout. My son sat back, stunned. My daughter lowered her eyes, cheeks burning with shame. The silence that followed wasn't the silence of surrender. It was the silence of judgment, of two children who realized their mother wasn't the fragile woman they thought she was. I rested my hand on the stack of legal papers, my safeguard, and spoke the sharpest truth of all. "You forgot something, my dears. You didn't build this home. You didn't pay for it. And you certainly didn't earn the right to take it from me. This house isn't just mine, it will never be yours." My words settled into them like stones they couldn't spit out. Their arrogance had cracked, and in its place was something new: fear. And for the first time in years, I felt taller than the walls around me. The papers lay scattered across the table like broken promises. The pen that was meant to steal my home now rested on the floor, forgotten. My son's chest still heaved with anger, but his words had run dry. My daughter's hands trembled as she tried to hide behind her wine glass, but the shame in her eyes gave her away. The lawyer cleared his throat politely. "That concludes everything," he said, packing his briefcase with calm precision. "There's nothing more to discuss." And then he left, the click of the front door sounding like a verdict. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. My children sat across from me, small and shrinking, the arrogance drained from their faces. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth had already done the work for me. When they finally rose to leave, their steps were slower than when they came in. My son didn't meet my eyes. My daughter muttered something that never quite formed into words. They left the house in silence, the slam of the door less forceful than before. I stood by the window, watching them walk to their cars. The neighbors across the street had stepped onto their porch, pretending to water their plants but clearly watching the scene unfold. They caught my eye, and instead of pity, there was something else: respect. One even nodded, tipping his cap slightly like a soldier saluting. For years, I'd felt invisible, dismissed as the old woman on the corner. But now, even the neighborhood knew I was not someone to be brushed aside. That evening, I brewed tea as the sun dipped low, painting the red bricks gold. The house was quiet, but this quiet was different. It wasn't betrayal, it was peace. I sat on the porch swing, feeling the wood creak under me, the Bible resting on my lap, the roses perfuming the air. Behind me, the walls seemed to breathe with relief, as if the house itself had waited for this moment. And for the first time in years, I whispered aloud to the memory of my husband. They tried to take it all, but I held on. We built this, and it's still ours. The apple trees rustled softly as if he answered back. I closed my eyes, not in exhaustion, but in quiet dignity. My children had left in shame, but I remained rooted, unshaken, exactly where I belonged. The storm had passed, but its lesson lingered. In the days that followed, the house felt lighter, as if the bricks themselves had exhaled. My children didn't call, not at first. Pride can build walls higher than any fence, but I didn't wait by the phone. I didn't ache for an apology. I had something stronger, peace. Neighbors came by more often, one bringing a pie, another stopping just to chat on the porch swing. Their words were simple, but their eyes said everything. We saw, we know, we respect you. I realized then that dignity isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the steady refusal to be erased, the quiet strength of holding your ground while others stumble. One afternoon, I stood in the backyard, watching the apple trees sway. Their branches had grown heavy with fruit, bending but never breaking, just like me. I reached up, plucked one, and bit into it. Sweet, sharp, alive. Later that night, I sat at the dining table, the same table where my children had tried to corner me. But this time, the papers spread out before me weren't theirs. They were mine. Letters I had started writing, stories of this house, of my husband, of the struggles and victories carved into every room. A legacy, not for lawyers or buyers, but for grandchildren who deserve to know the truth. I smiled as I wrote the first line. This is the story of the home I refused to give away. Because in the end, this was never just about property. It was about memory, love, and the quiet fire that even age cannot put out. The house stood tall on Maple Lane, and so did I, rooted, steady, unshaken. They had tried to sell my past, but I had reclaimed my future. And as the evening sun poured gold across the red bricks, I whispered to myself, firm and clear, I was never too old. I was never too weak, and I will always be one step ahead.